where I think we can now confidently claim that we are an example is how we have built kind of a data infrastructure to really monitor what is happening in our ecosystem.
Dries, I'm so excited to talk to you now. I've been really looking forward to it. Not only have I heard so many good things about you, but you're also essentially in the eye of the thunder of this startup machine, WHU. So really looking forward to it. Thanks a lot for joining this session.
Thanks for the invitation.
Thank you. So before we talk about your kind of endeavor as a professor at WHU and also the university in general, maybe some personal questions. I always like to hear about the people. Maybe you could share a little bit about your background. How did you become a chair of entrepreneurship, innovation, and technology? Transformation of WHU. I guess you didn't wake up as a young boy in kindergarten and said, "That's what I want to do."
No, so I'm originally from Belgium. So I grew up in the Flemish part of Belgium, did my bachelor and master and PhD at the University of Leuven, where I actually focused on the topic of collaboration for innovation, so how companies can work together. Subsequently, I spent quite some years in the Netherlands, first at the University of Twente, then in the University of Groningen, where I step by step became a professor on innovation management. And so since 2018, I'm at WHU, where I'm taking the chair of innovation, entrepreneurship, and technological transformation, and where I'm also the academic director of the Entrepreneurship Center. And we're actually also a bit because I joined WHU, my interest shifted a bit from innovation in large companies to entrepreneurship at startups, because as we will discuss, I suppose that's a very hot topic at WHU, entrepreneurship, startups. So I also shifted a bit my research interest in that direction. So in the past, I've done mainly kind of hardcore academic research on innovation and open innovation, and now I'm actually more focusing on the topic of startups.
Amazing. So you're already mentioning that now you're at WHU. Can you briefly describe it? Like, what type of an institution is it? Where is it? Maybe a few people haven't heard of it.
Yeah, that's still one of our issues, that not everybody has heard about it. So WHU is a very small private business school, and our headquarters are situated in Wallander, which is a small village close to Koblenz. And we also have a campus in Düsseldorf where we mainly do our MBA teaching and executive teaching. So we have nowadays two campuses. And the campus in Wallander, there we do the bachelor teaching and the master teaching. And so it's, like I said, a very small school. So we have like 2,000 students every year. But that, of course, also makes that it's a very kind of intense environment where students work together in small classes, and really have to know each other.
Yeah, I assume that's certainly the case. And what's the exact focus or the focus areas would you would say?
I think traditionally WHU was known as a school where we trained consultants and bankers. That was a kind of the traditional story. But I think nowadays we are really known as a school to kind of educate entrepreneurs. And that there is kind of a legacy of successful entrepreneurs that have emerged out of the school. And that legacy is now still maintained. We also now have a master in entrepreneurship, so where students can really specialize in that topic. So I think today WHU is really known as this school that is really focused on entrepreneurship.
Amazing. And I mean there are now several kind of universities and institutions that focus on that. What do you believe sets WHU apart from other institutions?
Yeah. Now, I think because we are such a small school, where sizes are very small in comparison with other more public universities, I think we have the opportunity to be a bit more, I would say, action driven. So I teach in the bachelor and master all kinds of entrepreneurship courses, and actually the amount of traditional teaching in these classes is relatively small. What we mainly try to do is to stimulate our students to build startups, to engage with our alumni, And that's something we can do because we are such a small school. I've worked before at bigger universities where simply because of logistical reasons that was very difficult. But here we have the advantage, given kind of the setup and given the very strong and committed alumni network, that we can really kind of have a very action-driven approach. So I think that that makes a difference.
Very interesting. I'm certainly going to come back to that later. I have a lot of questions around
Okay.
that. But maybe one of the things I'm always wondering. So obviously, WHU had tremendous success, but how do you actually deal with, in a way, quality control and strive for performance in a university setup? Where, as I understand, most professors and chairs of institutes are pretty independent.
Yeah, no, it's definitely true that at WHU, I think actually in Germany in general, professors have a lot of independence. As mentioned before, I've been in Belgium and the Netherlands, and there definitely professors don't have the level of autonomy and independence as in Germany, which I think is also has historical reasons. Now, your question suggests a tension between quality, monitoring, and independence. I actually think there is no tension. I think we can deliver very high quality because we have such high independence. I think it's one of the biggest mistakes that we have made in the 20 years is to assume that you can improve quality by heavily monitoring people and taking away autonomy. And I think actually WHU demonstrates that by giving professors a lot of autonomy and trust them that they do a good job, that they actually can perform much better than having 10 administrators that are continuously asking us to fill in all kinds of surveys and forms. I'm very happy that actually the level of bureaucratization of education at WHU is very small. And I actually think that contributes to the quality and doesn't jeopardize it. And again, that doesn't mean that sometimes things go wrong at WHU. Of course, we sometimes have crazy professors that do crazy stuff, but that's part of the experience. Also, I would say as a student that you need to have. But I would say in general, I think actually this is really helpful.
That's very interesting because it traditionally has been a big point of critique about the German, and I think in parts, European education system, that you didn't have this kind of top down
Yeah,
direction opportunities
yeah,
as you have actually in many Anglo Saxon
yeah.
countries. So you're suggesting that actually, at least in parts, the opposite is true, um, which I think is a very, very interesting point. And then another one, maybe adding to that, what I think is fascinating, also in the analysis we did is what you see is that WHU is actually really good, and there are a few universities that achieve that in research, teaching, and entrepreneurship.
Mm.
But how do you make sure that you're also excellent in all three areas?
I think it also has to do with incentives. I think we have good financial incentives to kind of promote our professors to be excellent in all these things. Yeah? So, as a professor, of course, you need to be good in research, especially if you want to be in this kind of institution as WHU. Otherwise, you simply don't get in. But I would say that at WHU, the incentive systems very heavily take into account our educational quality. Yeah? So the kind of evaluations that our students give to our teaching are very important, or taken very seriously. So in that way, teaching is definitely not a kind of side job at WHU. You have to take it very seriously, and the students are also very demanding because they pay quite substantial money to be there. And I think entrepreneurship is more because we have this tradition. That Can I say that it's because of the professors? I don't know. Also, from my perspective, I came to WHU. I saw this very rich entrepreneurial ecosystem, so it was quite easy to leverage it. Should we now claim that we are the most fantastic professors that have made this entrepreneurial success? I don't think so. It's nice to have it, and I think we nowadays really try to leverage it. So I think we have taken quite some steps in the past years to leverage it, but to some extent, I think it was also the accomplishment of our alumni and our students that have really established that. I think about we have this yearly conference called Idea Lab that is fully organized by the students. We as professors are not involved, and they also don't want us to be involved, and that's perfectly okay. And that creates a very entrepreneurial spirit on campus that, to be honest, is caused by the students, not by us.
Amazing. Maybe can I come back to research? You said you're heavily incentivized. So essentially, you receive a bonus, or professors receive a bonus dependent on the evaluation of the students.
Yeah, it's not that directly. So we there is a kind of yearly evaluation of your performance, and all the three areas are part of that evaluation.
Oh, that's so your research basically performance, your teaching performance,
Yes.
and your contribution to the entrepreneurship ecosystem go into your yearly evaluation as a professor.
Yep.
So that's pretty interesting. And then how, maybe let's focus a little bit on, before we go to other topics, on research. What do you feel that WHU and maybe also you are doing to really foster a thriving research environment?
Um, Again, I think what I really appreciate at WHU is that we as professors have the freedom to do or the research that we want to do. So I've been at universities where they had all kinds of strategic plans and how we needed to focus our research on specific domains. And that, to be honest, caused a lot of coordination, a lot of transaction cost, and in my opinion, very limited added value. Whereas at WHU, we have full autonomy to do the research that we want. And for instance, I decided, I would say like 5 years ago, to really go deep into natural language processing and how I can use that for my research. And quite luckily now with generative AI, that has become a very hot topic. So there I was a bit lucky, and I'm now really further developing that. And it's a bit of a high risk, high reward strategy. So in the short term, I'm not really publishing a lot on that, but I hope that in the longer term, it can help me to really kind of take a leading position on that topic. And you see that other professors at WHU are also developing their own strategies and often very successful. For instance, on the topic of family businesses, WHU was recently recognized as the top university in the world in terms of publishing research on family businesses. Also, our supply chain management group has been recognized several times. Our management accounting group has kind of consistently been performing as the best doctoral student group. So there are a lot of kind of gems at WHU that are doing extremely well, even on a global scale, which is not self-evident for a European university. So in that way, I think the model is working. But again, I think it's about trusting professors that they can do a good job and giving them a lot of autonomy and also some resources to do that.
Very interesting. And do you think that the three areas, being great in research, great in teaching, and great entrepreneurial, are correlated,
Yeah.
or is it just kind of somehow happens they coexist?
No, I think in the domain of management, and I have to be specific in the domain of management and in the domain of business schools, I think there is a very high correlation between all three of them. Actually, as a researcher, you need to be very entrepreneurial. I always, the more I talk with entrepreneurs, the more I feel a high kind of similarity between a good entrepreneur and a good professor. A good professor needs to kind of ask provocative question, needs to be able to be very resilient, to deal with failure, work often with kind of limited resources in a very creative way. And I would think these are actually also the traits that a good entrepreneur needs to have. So in that way, I think actually good research and good entrepreneurs are quite similar. So it's not to me surprising that in a business environment, the top research professors also show a lot of entrepreneurship and are good teachers, because in our domain, doing good research is also a lot about being able to communicate your research very well. Sometimes maybe a bit too much, but so you need to be a very good communicator to kind of present your research. So in that way, I think they're all correlated. I think if you go to the kind of hardcore science or deep tech or mathematics, there I think it can be different. There I think you can have nerds that kind of spend their life into an empty room thinking about the most crazy things and being amazingly smart and maybe not that entrepreneurial and maybe are not able to kind of teach what they know because they're simply too smart. So I think there the correlation might be lower, but I think in our field there is a very high correlation.
Okay, amazing. So you mentioned, and we spoke already a little bit about teaching. Are there any teaching innovations at WHU that you're really proud of?
It's actually now quite recently. I'm very proud that we are taking a very proactive stance towards generative AI. So I see that in a lot of schools they are very reluctant to kind of have students working with it. I think at WHU we have taken a different approach. We have said, look, the technology is there. We will not be able to stop it. So let's embrace it and actually motivate our students to use it. And so, for instance, I myself, in the bachelor, I do the obligatory entrepreneurship course. So that's a course that every student needs to take. And now I've completely redesigned that course where actually students are forced to use a wide variety of generative AI tools in all the steps of the startup development. Yeah, so in the problem identification, the ideation on a value proposition, the hypothesis testing. In all these steps, they now have to use generative AI, and we have also developed tools for them so that they can use it. So I think there I'm quite proud to say that I think we have taken a very proactive approach, and I think that will benefit us.
Can I maybe take this even further to be a little bit more provocative?
Yes.
What in if you look at today's societal kind of environment and technological environment, why do you think that a university or WHU would be still relevant?
Yeah.
And if you
No.
take somebody like maybe somebody like Peter Thiel, who says, "Look, actually, these higher education environments, they are a waste of time." And smart people, whatever you want to learn, you learn from the web, and then you just get practice by starting your own business or do what you think matters.
It's a provocative statement, and I also would agree with it. I recently did a LinkedIn post where I actually noticed that in the past 2 years I have learned much more from watching YouTube videos than from reading academic papers. That's at the moment my source of knowledge. If you're on generative AI and you want to learn how to do it, it's not by reading academic papers. You just watch nerds doing it on YouTube. But of course, that triggers fundamental question about our educational trajectory ourselves. Uh, I think we are now really in the process of thinking about what does that mean, and it's very difficult to see how this field is moving forward. So I think it's a bit wait and see, but at least trying to be a bit proactive in dealing with these issues. But do we have the perfect answer at the moment? Definitely not.
I mean, this is really interesting. So what would be like if you could say you're the best design for education
Yeah.
and to become an entrepreneur? Is it really going to a university? Um,
Now again, I still think that a university can teach you some basic skills that can be really helpful. For instance, what I sometimes get annoyed is this kind of thing like the best entrepreneurs or the university dropouts that stopped university. And we know that's bullshit from academic research. It's like, okay, there are these exceptions of the crazy guys that dropped out and became very successful. But if you look on average and you look at the kind of hardcore statistical predictions, actually going to a top school is a very good, and getting a degree from that top school is a very good predictor of becoming a successful entrepreneur. So apparently we are still doing something good despite what people like Peter Thiel are sometimes shouting out. So I think on average it still makes a lot of sense and we can learn new skills, but we also need to realize that things are changing. And again, for instance, in my obligatory entrepreneurship course, students do not need to read one single sentence. So, in terms of the teaching, what they need to do is to listen to podcasts, build their own startup, talk with alumni, and pitch their startup. But I don't want them to read books. I really don't believe that you can become an entrepreneur by reading books. That I don't believe. So I see that in definitely in that kind of domains, we need to fundamentally shift our teaching. Does that mean that we need to do that in all domains? Again, I also teach my students some coding, and there, yeah, you need to build some basic kind of skills, and that requires some hard work. And you cannot learn that by listening to a podcast. You really need to learn it by just doing and getting the discipline in doing it. So it also depends a bit on different fields. But yeah, I think uh, we need to fundamentally rethink how we are teaching our students.
and then if you rethink it, how would you envisage the kind of university of the future?
um, Now, still, I think it's also important that we give our students a good basic knowledge, because I think sometimes that's where the pendulum might swing too much in another direction, and that you just say to your students, "Go ahead and build something," but then they actually miss the fundamental knowledge to do that in a good way. If you cannot understand a good econometric regression, if you cannot write a proper sentence, if you cannot understand the financial statement analysis, you also have a problem. So I think we need to kind of revive our education, but we should not forget that we need still to teach some fundamentals to our students, and we need to do that in an academically grounded manner. Yeah? Because of course nowadays you also have this kind of entertainment MBAs that you can do online, which might have like 10 CEOs giving a 5-minute TikTok clip, but that's not education for me. That's entertainment, and that's okay if you want to have entertainment. And instead of a Netflix subscription, you want to watch that. That's okay for me, but please don't call that an academic MBA. And I don't want to be in that game. I don't want to become a clown in a theater. Yeah? I'm still a professor. So there we also have a kind of tension, I would say.
Absolutely, I have so many thoughts. I think it's really going to be interesting how the whole concept of education is actually developing.
Yeah,
But personally, I would agree. I think that having some foundations and also learning how to learn is a good thing.
yeah,
And something that, for example, also I enjoyed at university was like building these kind of strong connections to people. I have some of my best friends come from university. So I think that's still something where I don't know how you would kind of translate this in a digital manner.
yeah. No, and there, for
Um,
instance, we at WHU, we have taken there a very radical position. We don't in our we have an online MBA, so that's fully online. But in all the other teaching, which is in-class teaching, we don't provide hybrid options. The people need to be in class. So there, we really believe in the added value of in-class teaching, where people are present and are not sitting behind their screens. So I think there we also have taken quite a radical approach, I would say.
So maybe switching a little bit now to the whole section of entrepreneurship and
Yep.
really the founders themselves. Can you share some of the success stories of startups that originated from your campus?
Yes, as of course, if you go back in time, and I think this is not a big secret. So a very important kind of event was Oliver Zamner creating his startups, and in the end, Rocket Internet, which also kind of attracted a lot of WHU students and alumni to Rocket Internet, that then subsequently created their own companies. And so both Zalando and HelloFresh have WHU founders that all have emerged out of this Rocket Internet ecosystem. So that has been a very important kind of event for WHU and its kind of entrepreneurial reputation. Of course, there have been full podcasts about the history of Rocket Internet. You can also criticize some of the things that happened there, and that to some extent sometimes have been reflected on WHU. But I think we need to acknowledge that that has been a huge effect, a huge legacy. And what we see nowadays, and that's what we also try to monitor, is that we see that kind of the prior generations of successful entrepreneurs, that they are also investing in our new generation of WHU entrepreneurs. So we see a very strong kind of social capital network effect, where kind of the prior generation is monitoring, mentoring, but also investing in the new generation. And that definitely can give them a head start. And for me, that's kind of the most fundamental explanation for the success of WHU. We have simply been able to create this network effect that seems to be able to sustain over generations. And I think that's very important. And we at the Entrepreneurship and WHU, that's kind of our main goal, that we simply want to kind of nurture and further stimulate that network effect.
Absolutely. I think what's interesting, what I've heard and read, and it's I think in the second part of the name Otto Beisheim Business School, and Otto Beisheim, the basically the co-founder of the university, beginning of the 80s. he was one of the great post-war German entrepreneurs who built one of the largest at the time retail groups.
Mm.
So it seems that actually from the foundations and over the different paths, it's a little bit in the DNA of the university.
Yeah,
But
and that was the university was also created, as far as I understand, by the local Handelskammer to stimulate kind of regional economic development. Now you could argue maybe we have stimulated more the Berlin economic development in the end, but still, this was a kind of objective of the university. So in that way, I think that's indeed part of the legacy also.
yeah. Maybe I mean obviously you're teaching entrepreneurship. You see many founders to be. Do you see any common traits in them already as a student? So can you tell if somebody will start his startup, and then can you see if somebody is successful, and if so, what are you seeing?
I have asked myself sometimes that question. Now, again, I'm at WHU since 2018, so not that long. Am I good in spotting the successful entrepreneurs? I would say no. So I find it
Otherwise,
very
you should
difficult.
maybe invest in all of them.
Yeah, no. So um, I think I'm very good in identifying students that can become top managers. That I think I know, or that can become very good researchers for entrepreneurs. I have to be honest. I've not been able. I've sometimes been surprised about the people who, in the end, became the successful entrepreneurs. That were not always the students that stood out. I have to say,
Oh, really?
which
So
is
maybe,
interesting. Which is
maybe
interesting.
so you would say not being best in
Yeah.
class is a certain so having a decent education, but not being best in
Yeah.
class. So then maybe what do you spot, or how can you share? How can you say somebody is a great or will become a great manager or will become a great researcher?
Now, also for research, you see they need to have this kind of motivation to really go deep, to ask critical questions, and have this kind of resilience to deal with harsh criticism. If somebody is able to do that, when I supervise bachelor theses or master theses, and you see that I can push somebody and that they kind of get better by being pushed, and that they take initiative themselves to go deeper, then I know, okay, this person, if they would do a PhD, they would make it. I think for a good manager, it's more about, is somebody good in kind of what I would call stakeholder management. So the students in my course that are proactive and start organizing things among the students, or when something goes wrong in a class, that you see they take the initiative to try to solve it, that have the kind of the political understanding about how to manage relationships. These are for me the kind of future CEOs that we have at WHU. For entrepreneurs, to be honest, I have more difficulties to identify the traits. We sometimes have the ones that I can spot are, for instance, the one that have an Instagram meme account with 200,000 followers. Then you know, okay, this guy or this girl, whatever they will do something entrepreneurial, because if you're able to create an Instagram account with 200,000 followers, you know what to do. So, but these are quite the exceptions, I would say.
Yeah. So I mean, also, as I understand, a lot of students go to WHU to actually become entrepreneurs at some point on their time.
Yeah.
What kind of support structures do you have at WHU to offer to students, but maybe also to faculty, to postdocs, PhDs who are looking to start their own company?
Yeah, so we have our entrepreneurship center. It's actually a very small center. So we have our managing director, Max Eckel. We have one PhD student, Niklas Geis, that supports Max. And then it's me and Christoph Hinert, the other entrepreneurship professor, that are kind of the academic directors. That's it. So it's very small. It's not like at other universities where you have hundreds of people working at the center. That's maybe why we are very efficient. So that might be an explanation for that. Um, and so, what we mainly try to do is to kind of leverage the ecosystem that we have. So, instead of trying to do kind of a lot of initiatives ourselves, because we simply don't have the people and the resources, we mainly try to connect actors in our ecosystem. So, we kind of bring our students in touch with alumni, if a student or a recent alumnus has a startup idea, we will try to connect them with mentors. When a startup of an alumnus is investor ready, we will kind of bring them in touch with the venture capital people in our network. That's what we try to do mainly. And we now have also built a data infrastructure that also can help us to do that in a data-driven way. So it's not just, oh yeah, I know somebody. No, we also have a database where, based on what the startup is doing, we can actually search for people that can help him or her in their startup activity. So again, we really strongly believe in the power of the ecosystems of the network, and that's something we want to leverage.
That's so interesting to hear, because one of the things I just can't get my head around every time I see it. It's like, obviously in absolute numbers, WHU is smaller than some of the really large institutions. But if you look at it on per, like, startups per budget, startups
Yeah,
per students, unicorns per students, it's like, I think it's totally crashing it.
yeah,
It's, I don't even know if there is another institution that would kind of outperform WHU on basically input to output.
yeah,
um, so you would say core element of this is that you're not trying to basically know and teach everything yourself,
mm,
but more that you're actually a manager of relationship and connections
yeah.
of the alumni network, the ecosystem.
Yeah. So we try actually to take a very humble position. Like, look, it's not us that needs to kind of be the leading actor in this entrepreneurship. We need to be a facilitator. We need to try to give as much support as possible. But in the end, we should not be the leading actor, because that for me, that's not the right approach. I don't see why we should be kind of the starting point. No, it should be the entrepreneurs and the investors. They should be the driving force, and the more we can support and facilitate them, the better. But I don't want to be in the driver's seat, because I think that's simply the wrong approach. And to be honest, I see at a lot of universities that they try to do that and then they miserably fail, because typically they create a bloated kind of center with people, and then these people need to do things because they get paid to do things and they need to prove that they need to do something. And then they're simply doing what I call entrepreneurship theater. They are creating hackathons and incubators and all that kind of stuff, where a lot of time and resources are spent, but where the outcome is often quite disappointing, I would say. So we actually try to stay away a bit from that, and focus more on, okay, let's spot the potential in our network and try to stimulate as much that they connect with each other to make it happen.
I mean, it's actually, if you think about it, totally amazing that with essentially four people, you're managing one of the kind of most successful
Mm,
startup ecosystems in the world. And that's pretty amazing. It's you know what, it reminds me a little bit to these accelerators, and incubators that, I mean, many of them have tried to be built. And what oftentimes happens, you hire like 20, 50, sometimes even a few hundred people for
mm,
every specialty area, one person. And then you ask the startup, hey, you have to take them. Maybe the startups even have to pay in certain setups.
yeah,
But then you obviously can't always get the best person for online marketing, for social media marketing, for product design. So you end up having a lot of, in a way, mediocre people who then startups don't like to kind of pay for or hire. So some of the more successful approaches have actually been in this venture building as well,
yeah,
more leverage the ecosystem and make sure that you actually know who is the best person for a certain problem, instead of trying knowing everything yourself.
yeah,
It's also, it's like, there's the saying, like, there always are a lot more smarter people working and acting out of your organization than within your organization. And it seems like you have, like, basically hardcore taken this approach.
mm. Yeah. And just to give you an example, we have what we call a WHU accelerator. So every year we select like 8 teams that are very promising, and then for 4 weeks we put them in the accelerator. But what it simply is, during these 4 weeks, they will talk with 80 mentors out of our ecosystem.
Sorry, 80.
80, yeah. So we
Wow.
have 80 mentors, investors, alumni, product design specialists.
Every
So,
startup, so every
yeah,
founder within your
every
this.
So these 8 startups each talk with 80 people. Um,
Wow.
and so the budget is ridiculously limited because everybody is doing it for free. Yeah, so it's like uh, it's not a 5-digit budget. No, totally not. But I think actually the added value is very large. And so what we don't do is we don't give them a lot of workshops on all kind of topics because we don't know what these startups need. So it's simply kind of pressure cooker where we kind of put them in front of 80 experienced alumni to get a lot of feedback and input. And then we do a demo day at the end so that they then can pitch based on their learnings, and that's it. But we have seen quite some successful startups coming out of that. So we have quite now some of them that are in the Series A and whatever. So we think that that setup works, but again, it's a very lean, low cost approach. But that's not always bad, I think.
Maybe it's even in the end creates better outcome to have this bootstrapped
Yeah,
approach. Maybe even like the success factor of WHU is having a limited budget
yeah,
for since basically the last 40, 50 years.
yeah,
I don't know, but maybe then now coming to another topic more on an institutional level. For example, you mentioned many times the alumni and
yeah.
the strong ecosystem. I guess the alumni club plays a big role. Why do you think there is such a strong kind of connectivity amongst the graduates?
Because they all were in Vallender and there was nothing else to do than connect with each other. I think that's a big part of the explanation. Yeah, but again, I studied in Leuven, a big city where there's a lot of stuff to do. So I never had built the relationships that I see that my WHU students are building. So I think it's quite a unique experience, being on the Vallender campus for 3 years. I think, I think, as you also said, it creates very strong bonds and friendships that stay forever. And then, of course, we as WHU, we also try to nurture that. We have events where alumni come back to campus. We have a very active alumni association in Praxi that is organizing a lot of events. So that's definitely also nurturing then that network. So I think that's the explanation, I would say.
Yeah, maybe. So, but also, are they just like basically all the time at the campus, or also they go to other kind of countries, universities? They do the internships.
Yeah,
What's
they
like?
do
How
their
does the
internships.
curriculum
Yeah.
look like? Is there
Um,
exchange programs?
Yeah, so in the bachelor program, they are obliged to do 2 internships, so one in Germany and one abroad. They can also do an exchange semester where we have all kinds of partner universities all over the world where they can go through. And for instance, also our teaching. So we start September 1 and our teaching finishes mid of April already. So we have a very kind of time compressed program. So then students use kind of May, June, July to do their internships, to go abroad. So in that way, also the structure of our educational program is tailored towards making sure that students don't spend only time on campus, but also can have experiences outside. And that's quite an important part of it, I would say.
So it sounds like it's quite intensive, like basic, or you have like these blocks, not so much time actually just
Yeah.
in Fallenda, but then also
Yeah.
working in other countries, maybe going to another country for an exchange semester.
Yeah.
Okay, and what now again coming back to the institutional level, if you think like entrepreneurship is often termed as the possible third pillar of a modern university.
Mm-hmm.
Um, like, how do you feel that is this really ingrained, or probably it is, but what differentiates WHU from other universities in the approach of supporting that, and what maybe are some barriers that hinder other universities taking a more entrepreneurial approach?
No, I think, especially, I now have to compare it with the German public universities. I think that the great thing of WHU is that we have much less bureaucracy. Um, so when I talk with professors at German universities, the level of rules, certification, all kinds of crazy regulations, to be honest, often make it almost impossible to be very entrepreneurial because again, I now chose to make my entrepreneurship course a very generative AI driven course at a public university. That would be almost impossible because the kind of the syllabus to do it do not exist. And the fact that I instead of asking my students to read papers, instead they have to listen to podcasts. I can do that because at WHU we allow that. At other universities, very quickly an administrator might come and say, yeah, but where is your syllabus? Where are your papers that people have to read? So I think in that way, we have there again a bit of freedom, autonomy, and flexibility to be much more proactive and entrepreneurial, I would say. But that doesn't mean that there are no, and like think about TUM in München. They also do a lot of good stuff on entrepreneurship. A lot of things are happening there. So we are definitely not the only ones that are doing good things. But I also see a lot of universities struggling with that topic because of the kind of bureaucracy, GDPR, data privacy. And I'm not saying that you should simply ignore that, but I sometimes also have the feeling that we have come to a kind of a regulatory overload that kind of completely blocks entrepreneurship in that respect.
And would you say that, I mean, so you're essentially saying that the bureaucratic kind of burden is hindering this more than the willingness of
Yeah.
universities to go that direction?
Yeah.
And would you say that's only true in Germany or also in other European countries?
I think also in other European countries, but in Germany, I have to say, I noticed it quite remarkably hard. Let's say it like that.
We Germans, we like structure and organization and probably have taken it a bit too far.
Yeah.
So another area now to if you think about in the big picture, the critique that has come up is that most of the world's problems in today's world are more physical or complex technical problems. Now, a kind of educational institution like WHU is mainly, if I look back, creating, let's say, software, internet companies. A lot of like the big successes are e-commerce companies. What do you think about it? And are there any initiatives to build more technical, more hardware, more deep tech companies?
Yeah, I think it's a valid criticism, and we are also concerned about that. So also we believe that the future of entrepreneurship is focused on deep tech, yeah? And to be honest, our students are not the deep tech nerds. Yeah? They have very strong capabilities, but they are not the engineers. So one thing we are actually doing is in September we will launch a new master program, so a master in data analytics, where we want to kind of attract also people that are really interested in data analytics. So I hope that can also bring a kind of new set of students with some different skills. And then I also think that the kind of connection with the other students could be very interesting. Apart from that, what we do at the Entrepreneurship Center at the moment is actually we have a lot of informal contacts with technical universities. So my managing director, Max Eckel, he has a very good network. So he knows kind of similar managing directors at the technical universities. And so when a technical university has a kind of team of PhD students that have created a spin-off, but they don't really have a kind of business co-founder, then they reach out to us and say, look, we have this team of nerds, but they would need somebody that can do more the kind of the business part. And then we are actually, again, simply looking on our network, like, do we know somebody that could be a good fit with this team? Could we kind of deliver a WHU co-founder that can enrich that team from a business perspective? And in that way, we can help them to have good people, but it also helps us to make sure that we kind of make sure that we have WHU co-founders in these deep tech teams, because we believe that's the future. So again, we mainly there kind of put our money on the networking and trying to kind of leverage our connections with other technical universities to make sure that we can bring in kind of the business talent into these startups.
So you would say you're open for business with other
Yeah,
universities.
yeah, yeah. So we don't see them as competitors. It's simply like we think we have some unique skills. We also have some limitations, and we see a lot of complementarities and synergies there. And that's why we have been setting up kind of this network approach of like, okay, if you have a kind of deep tech team that is lacking a business person, maybe we can find somebody in our network that can support it.
And how does your university collaborate with kind of the industry players, with investors to really promote the entrepreneurial ventures?
Again, I think we have a very informal approach there. So we know very well the alumni in the investment community. Again, we have a database with all the angel investors in our network. Sometimes we know a bit too much about them, maybe. But so we know where we have WHU alumni in the VC companies. And again, then if we find a startup, and we're actually also developing now a matching platform where people can themselves start kind of registering themselves and can look for matches. So we want to kind of automate that a bit. That's the bit work in progress that we are doing. So again, there we are simply kind of investing in the networking.
Amazing. And if you think about what do you think are the biggest bottlenecks to transfer academic resources, research into the business world, maybe in general, but then also into product startup creation?
Yeah.
And do you have any suggestions, solutions? How could you improve that?
Now I have two different opinions about it. On the one hand, I think we as professors, we have a responsibility to translate what we do in our research to the public domain. And for instance, I do that nowadays mainly via LinkedIn. So I'm heavily using LinkedIn, and I have the feeling that that works out well. At the same time, I think we should av- sometimes academic research is simply boring and very incremental, and it needs to be like that. Yeah. So as sometimes, look, can I perfectly predict out of 100 startups which will be the next unicorn? No, I cannot do that. And also a biologist cannot predict out of 100 people who will become the one that will get 110 years old. I think that's an unrealistic expectation from academics. Yeah? So we need to accept that academics is a very kind of nerdy, uh, long term, very focused on definitions and hardcore statistics. And that's not always the most exciting for kind of then the average entrepreneur. Um, but we need to make sure that we continue to do that, because otherwise we will lose that fundamental knowledge base. So sometimes I have a feeling if we push professors too much to become kind of entertainment clowns with provocative statements, and we all need to be Scott Galloway who can shout out provocative things, I don't think that's the right way to go. Yeah, we need the kind of boring professors that do very good work and solid research. But that does not mean that we should not at least try to kind of communicate to the outside world what we are doing. Yeah, so I think it's important, but we should also not go the other way and turn professors into entertainment clowns in a circus. And that
Uh,
sometimes is the risk.
Absolutely, it's for sure. You need this kind of base of knowledge, and also
Mm.
keep that base of knowledge, develop it further,
No,
and also the world wouldn't develop further from just social media for sure.
no.
But so maybe in general, then, what do you think other universities or other companies can learn from WHU, both as institutions, but also in supporting founders?
Yeah, I think, and of course, every university has its own context. Yeah, so I would not claim that you can simply copy paste our approach to other universities because they have a different context. We are a very small school, and that has some advantages and disadvantages. And in that way, bigger schools where you have to teach for 300 students, they simply require a different approach. I think the one thing that I think where I think we can now confidently claim that we are an example is how we have built kind of a data infrastructure to really monitor what is happening in our ecosystem. So we have leveraged things like LinkedIn, Crunchbase, Dealroom to really start understanding, okay, what have been the founders in our ecosystem, what are they doing, and nowadays we are heavily using kind of generative AI to really push the data intelligence out of it. And I think that's something where we can teach most universities quite a lot. So we now know what is going on. To be honest, 5 years ago at WHU, we also did not really know what was going on into our ecosystem. So there we have invested a lot in the past years, and that has really benefited us. Also because now we can kind of promote the founders in our ecosystem, because every time now when an alumnus raises a Series A round, we know it, and we can also promote it on LinkedIn, and we know that the alumni really appreciate that. So I think there, and again, it was not about investing hundreds, thousands of euros. No, with limited amounts of money and some data intelligence, you can do a lot nowadays. So there, I think universities can learn quite a lot from us, I would say.
So it's again more the approach, understanding who is
No.
kind of doing what,
Yeah.
and not trying to basically, how to say, kill things with resources, but doing it a smart way. So maybe as one of the final questions. What are your goals for the next 5 years, or maybe even 10 years, for WHU?
um, I have a principle that I don't have plans for the next 5 years or 10 years, because at least in my experience, it's more about at a certain time opportunities come on your way, and then it's about grasping these opportunities, but making kind of, at least in again in my domain, making 5 to 10 year plans. I have no idea. And like in 2018, I suddenly saw this vacancy for a professor at Entrepreneurship WHU, and I was like, oh, maybe I should have a talk with them. And then that happened. Was that part of my plan? No, not really. So it's also a bit opportunities and then grasping them. So in that way, we're not planning, but I want at WHU now to have a very strong data foundation, because I think whatever the next steps will be, what the opportunities will be, that data foundation will help us to leverage these opportunities. So I don't know which opportunities will come, but I want to be prepared for them. And I think we need to have a data infrastructure to do that. So that's why we are investing a lot of resources in that. And there, to be very honest, we would like to have more resources. So we are actually now setting up a plan to raise more money, also from the alumni, to be honest, to help us in establishing that data infrastructure and further building it. So there, I would say it's an example where I actually would like to have a bit more resources, because I think we could do even much more if we would have some additional resources.
So if you could wish for one thing, what would it be? Like, not like for the university, would it be more money, more applications? Would it be
Yeah.
more whatever?
Um, it's a very concrete wish, and we will actually reach out to our alumni with that wish in the short term. We want to have a CTO for our entrepreneurship center. So a person that has stronger capabilities than I have. Look, I can do coding, but I'm not a coding nerd. I want to have somebody that can really now leverage the data that we have and bring it to the next stage. And there I have high ambitions. I really want to kind of be a global example of how, as a university, you can build a data infrastructure that can stimulate entrepreneurship in your ecosystem. But I need more technical support for that. So that's my very concrete wish for the upcoming year, I would say.
That's a pretty cool vision. So you're turning WHU in a kind of software institution and data institution.
Now, but again, we will now have a master in data analytics, so I will have a new stream of students that could also be very helpful in that respect. And again, I also see my business students getting more and more interested in it. So I see a lot of opportunities there. But yeah, you need then to have some resources at least to make it happen.
Cool. So if somebody's listening and interested in that, write to Dries.
Yes, they can definitely reach out. And if they don't reach out, I will reach out to them. So
Excellent. Probably you see it in the data who would be a good fit.
yes.
Cool. So maybe uh, to kind of nearly finish up, what is there any advice? I mean, you're working a lot with young people now. Any advice you would give to young researchers, and advice to young entrepreneurs that aspire to really make an impact in their field?
Now, I think these are very exciting times. So we see these new technologies emerging. I see a lot of opportunities. So I think the most important, and we don't really know in which direction it's going. I think it's a bit too early to fully understand it. But I would encourage students to experiment. I would say one of the biggest frustrations in my life is that when I was like 18, 19, that was the start of the internet era. So it was like the end of the 90s when internet kind of came up. And I'm still a bit frustrated that at that time I was too lazy to delve into that. And I was like, if I would just have kind of taken up some effort in coding and developing websites, I could have done so much stuff, and it would have been so easy. And I, as a student at that time, I completely ignored that, and that still feels a bit as a frustration. That's also now with this whole generative AI. I said, okay, I'm still kind of young enough to to now take that step, and now I should not kind of ignore that opportunity. Let's say it like that. Whereas I have fully ignored the prior opportunity, I would say.
Wow. So experiment a lot, and that's
Yeah,
that's interesting. So essentially, you would say your super innovative approach stems from this experience where you didn't do it when you
yeah,
were younger.
yeah, yeah. No,
Yeah.
it's really, if I look back at it and I think about, it would have been so easy to kind of jump on that wave because I was proficient in coding. I understood how that was possible, so I just had to kind of pick it up and start doing it. Maybe at that time it was a bit more difficult to get to the resources to learn it. So I think that might have been a kind of hampering factor. But today, again, just watch 3 YouTube videos, start coding in Python, and you can quickly call yourself an expert in generative AI. That's not that difficult, you know. So there are huge opportunities there, I would say.
Absolutely. So huge opportunities out there. That's a great final statement.
Yes.
Dries, thank you so much. It was such an amazing, aspiring session and conversation with you. I truly enjoyed it, and I actually also learned a lot. So thank you so much for taking the time. And yeah, talk soon, hopefully.
Yes. Thank you for the invitation.
Ciao.